What I'd like to know is about this trip that unfolded in Germany. This was in 1937, so 2 years before the invasion of France and the declaration of World War II. A trip to Germany. What was the purpose of this trip, and what on earth was it that led him to being photographed with, we see his wife shaking hands with Adolf Hitler, with a full swastika on, there we go, on display.
If I give you the official reason, and then these guys can tell you what was actually
let's do that. That sounds like a sensible plan.
The official reason was that they were going as private citizens to Nazi Germany to review how amazingly the Nazis had dealt with the Depression and social housing and how well they looked after their people. Obviously, he doesn't have an official role, so why he feels the need to do this, I would argue, I don't know if you guys agree, that he's going because he's going to be fed. I mean, they called her Her Royal Highness. They just pander to him. That's what, and that's what he wanted.
Look how happy he is in that picture. There is a man who, I mean, that smile, that is chilling. That's
for him.
Wallace knows exactly what the problems are. That look is apprehension. That look on his face is joy. It's at last. I'm around my people. Unfortunately, his person happens to be Hitler.
They actually
hold on.
house as well. It wasn't just an official meeting. It was
his holiday home.
Wallace didn't have an audience with Hitler. She wasn't granted that, and Hitler was actually very.
But he did.
Standoffish. Edward spoke fluent German, but Hitler had an interpreter, and it was very benign. The conversation, by all accounts, very benign.
So why would you need an interpreter if he's fluent in German?
It's about control.
A witness.
Witness of events. OK, so just 1 second, though. So at this stage, when this photograph was taken, he's not the evil tyrant that history remembers. What is Hitler standing at that time, in terms of how he's viewed back here?
We've had Night of the Long Knives. I mean, we've had, Kristallnacht. We've had the idea that Hitler is not somebody you want to be associated.
Already in America, already in Britain, he's viewed as someone sinister. Obviously, when we don't have the scale of what's to come, but people are looking at this man with deep apprehension already.
But I think it's really important that we remember we were in denial, we hadn't rearmed in time, we always regarded Russia, Soviet Russia, as a bigger enemy than National Socialist Germany. That changed very late in the 1930s.
I think we have to be careful, though, between people's opinions being pro-appeasement, which this is either pro-Nazi, because there are a lot of Nazi sympathisers at upper levels of British society, and people who just don't want a war. They are two distinct
including the
things.
Lord Stewart and indeed his successor, both of whom had quite significant Nazi contacts. But obviously, this is to jump the gun slightly. What is fair to say, Edward should not have met Hitler. There was no circumstance under which that was a good idea.
When we talk about the trip, knowing what went on to happen, I mean, it does seem unbelievable now, does it not, that it even took place? Would that happen on Today's Watch, do you think?
No. But the thing is that you don't have...
Well, you say that, Harry and Meghan, right?
But then these are people that you no longer have control over.
But exactly.
This is the problem.
Harry and Meghan, we know that, they're no longer controlled by...
Harry's a different character.
I would put it more in the political domain. Macron going to chat to Putin just before the Ukrainian war. I think that it's so easy with the benefit of hindsight. We know that Edward was an anti-Semite, so were huge numbers of the British establishment. We know, for instance, that the reporter for the Times in Germany was constantly having to edit back what he was wanting to write about Nazi Germany because we didn't want to hear about it in Britain. Actually, we're quite compromised. We always talk about the children we let in, the kinder children who came across in kinder transport. Yeah, because we wouldn't let the adults in. 1 in 10 Jews who were applying to come to Britain at this time were allowed into Britain. So we were very compromised in terms of our stance towards Germany in the run-up to the late 1930s. And you could argue that there was Edward trying to build... I don't give him this much credit, but I think he was just out for himself and a role for himself, but trying to build bridges, taking an interest in housing. There was a wonderful cartoon about the Duke with all his many houses worrying about housing. And I think he genuinely thought in a philanthropic way he could go forward and give the same advice to America.
He would have loved to hear you say that.
Yeah,
he would.
He would have loved to come back to the world now, and he would have loved to have heard you speaking about him like that.
Okay, so what happened in Germany when the word got out, and that, I mean, it made them deeply unpopular to the point that there was an American tour planned, which would have been for Wallace exactly where she wanted to be, back in the country of her birth, being celebrated and feted.
You say that, but no, not even her hometown wanted her back.
Nobody wanted her back. This was ruinous.
Didn't want her back.
This was ruinous, and they had to retreat from public life, didn't they? And that's when they settled where?
It's interesting, Kate, because in Britain there was nothing like the vehemence that there was in America.
The Jewish minority in America always had a far bigger voice than it did in Britain, and I think that definitely had an impact on the reception or the anticipation of Edward and Wallis arriving in America. I think there was also concern in America about how it would look if they were moseying up to the ex-king when actually they were trying to forge a new relationship with the new king. And of course, George and Elizabeth went on their own tour of America and that was pending. So there was all sorts of power play going on. It wasn't just about Edward's flawed personality.
Do you think publicly the Americans have such a different view to us? Because for some God-for-known reason that would not happen nowadays, the British press do not cover them. For years, the American press are talking openly about their their relationship, what's going on. They have opinions, people are forming opinions, and the British press are really discreet and don't say a word. Do you think that makes the difference?
Well, it's because Lord Beaverbrook was a friend of Edward's, and obviously...
Well, let's establish who Lord Beaverbrook is.
Lord Beaverbrook was an all-powerful magnate who was, I mean, imagine Rupert Murdoch and Robert Maxwell and Elon Musk. And
all rolled into one.
And then magnified by about 5. And he was the single most important person.
He was the media.
Yes, he was the media.
OK, so that's good to know. Yeah. All right, let's also, let's just again, contextualise the time. So they returned from this disastrous trip and within weeks of preparing to tour the United States. But the week after they left for Munich, the Nazis executed 2 key members of the KPD.
You can see that in America there is obvious suspicion towards everything that Hitler was doing, and it proved to be very well-founded suspicion. And of course, in Britain, as you said, there was much more appeasement at the higher levels. There was much more of a sense that Britain was not ready to fight another war.
Edward and Wallis retreated from public life and settled in France. But when Germany invaded France on the 10th of May in 1940, their movements were both intriguing and remain something of a mystery to this day. So what happened? Where were they when, for example, war broke out?
Specifically by the swimming pool.
And Edward was told about the outbreak of war, and he didn't panic or do anything like that. He just sighed, well, I fear this is going to open the world up to socialism, when he dived into the swimming pool. And it's an amazing...
Seriously?
Yeah,
seriously.
That's...
It's an amazing visual image.
Yeah,
the idea that his
does.
nonchalance was such that he just looks at it, because he hated anything to do with socialism, communism, the left.
That wasn't hugely unusual in a royal family where huge numbers of royals they were related to in Russia had been rolled over and murdered. It should be given in context. That was also within living memory. He did have a military role. He did work for the BFE, the British Expeditionary Force. In fact, I've spoken to a couple of veterans at that time. One, an English girl working for a French ambulance regiment, and she recalls very vividly that she was the only English girl working among the French, and the Duchess of Windsor was going to come and donate an ambulance, and she would have to receive it because she was the English representative. And she refused to curtsy because she hated Wallis so much and all that she represented. And it reminded me of another, the oldest woman I spoke to before she died within living memory of all that happened around the abdication. Very representative of feudal Britain. She'd worked as a servant. It was the opinions of the likes of her that had made politicians realise he had to go. She sat forward in her chair, aged 102, and went, that woman was not going to be my queen. That American divorcee was not going to be my queen. And both those 2 anecdotes tap me into this sea swell of deep loathing directed towards Wallis. And I think we have to bear that in mind when we're going to hear from Alex how they responded, the ambivalence towards Britain's war effort. They both felt really burnt by Britain. They felt hated by Britain, particularly Wallis. Not being given the HRH title was just the tip of it. She really had been vilified by the Brits and rejected, and I think that stuck with them.